Hello and welcome to this live edition of the Albion Obsessed podcast. You join us on the back of a fantastic win against reigning champions Manchester City. But before we get into any of that, we need to ask the simple question. Joe, why the hell is your Christmas tree up?
A 3-year-old daughter.
This is an acceptable
that's my
answer. How are you though, Joe?
Tom, I am absolutely bloody fantastic. I don't think could wipe the smile off my face for the next 10 years. I just can't believe that you've just said the words, "We just beat Manchester City." Yeah, it's been a great 24 hours, Tom. It really has.
I'm glad to hear it, Joe. Let's keep hoping that a smile stays on your face when we inevitably lose 4-0 to Southampton. Dagan, is your Christmas tree up? That's the first thing I want to ask you.
Not yet, but I have no qualms with Joe and his family and their exuberant level of enthusiasm for the holidays. But no, not yet for us. I'm going to go ahead and preemptively apologize for those who are watching. I'm going to be looking down. I'm doing a little bit of a research project in real time with some fun data to reveal about just how good we were, both in the game and in the second half.
Spectacular. I look forward to hearing that. Chloe, first and foremost, is your Christmas tree up? And secondly, how are you?
My Christmas tree is not up. I have done all my Christmas shopping. Secondly, yeah, bloody brilliant. Absolutely buzzing on the back of that win. Yeah.
Tom, is your Christmas tree up and how are you?
No, because it's November. It's December 1st, I will be wearing a Christmas jumper every single day. I will be decking the halls with holly and fun and joyness because I love Christmas. I genuinely do, but I cannot get into the spirit until December the 1st. Dems the rules. Although I did go to a garden centre today and buy some Christmas decorations. So, it's a bit of a trade-off. Bjorn liked looking at the pretty lights, so there you go. As for how I am, it's been a stressful term so far at school, but you know what? Yesterday put a big smile on my face. So let's talk about that. Let's dive straight into it, gang. Of course, we are live, so drop your thoughts down below as we chat through this. Joe, the first thing I want to tell you is Ferdi Kadioglu did pretty well against Liverpool, but didn't feature yesterday due to an injury. Simona Dingra coming into the starting 11. How did you feel about that replacement? Were you disappointed with no Ferdi? And how do you feel about Simon starting from the off? Lots of people would say that he's an impact sub. How do you feel about that change?
Obviously, it's always a shame to see someone who's just scored a goal a week prior to not be in the squad at all, not even on the bench. And he's had a really good start to life here at the AMEX, at the Albion as well. Got his goal against Wolves, got a goal just a week gone. So, yeah, it's always a shame, but I think you have to be careful with the players that have come in and are adapting to a new physical league and playing a lot of football. I mean, we've had a lot of games over the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks. So going into an international break now gives him some time to come back. And I think it's just a case of managing your squad and making sure we've got players for a tough sort of run in over the festive period. And yes, I'm using festive period in November. Come at me. But yeah, it's just good to be careful with these players because we don't want them out long term.
Yeah, definitely, and it was really refreshing to see some returning players. Dagan, obviously, João Pedro coming back into the match day squad. I mean, to be fair, I think Ruta and Welbeck have done well in his absence. Perhaps what we have missed though is that impact from the bench or another body to come on. I mean, Ferguson, fair play, scored against Wolves, but it's not quite the same as João Pedro and the sort of, I don't know, the presence he has on the pitch and the game-changing ability that man has. So really good to see João Pedro back.
Yeah, I mean, I was wearing the shirt, the João Pedro shirt yesterday, knowing that he was likely to be in the team. It's just yeah, buzzing to see him again. And then O'Reilly as well, and we'll obviously talk more about both of them. But Herzler said after the game, just João Pedro is both brings some things that other players don't, and is becoming a real leader, especially amongst the young guys on the team. His belief, and he's just like, he's the guy who will pound his chest. And I think every player obviously can do that, but he just sort of exists in that state of being at all times. Like everything he does is with a "I'm better than you, I can beat you" kind of attitude. And it's infectious, it's contagious, and why he's the guy that I probably gravitate toward the most. From the time he joined us last year, just swagger. Yeah, so thrilled that he's back in the team. I'm sure we'll talk more about his exploits later.
Oh, we certainly will do. And I like that word you use, swagger, because I think that he comes with that with heaps. Chloe and Matt O'Reilly, as Dagan has said, come back from what must have been the shortest first game ever, the shortest debut, after getting absolutely hammered from that clogger from Crawley. Really good to see him back on the bench ahead of schedule as well, because I don't think we'd be seeing him just yet. So again, it was really interesting to see how he came on in the second half over someone like Matt Zweifer, who's been the sort of the go-to. But generally, were you happy to see him back on the bench? Same with João Pedro?
Yeah, very happy. It was such a shame that he got injured in that Crawley game, which was a horrendous tackle, and I can't believe the player didn't get anything for it. But so yeah, it was lovely to see him on the bench, and then obviously come on. Yeah.
And just so we can put it out there as well. Since that event happened, Crawley Town have only won once in the league. So there you go, you northern bastards. Game starts. I think, Joe, we were spoilt a bit last week against Liverpool, in the sense that our first half against Liverpool was probably the best 45 minutes we've played this season. I'd go out as far as to say that. I thought last week, Ayari and Hinchelwood, especially in the midfield, dominated that. Obviously, Manchester City, a different kettle of fish. I think it's probably fair to say that it was probably the weakest, and I'm using that term very loosely, weakest Manchester City side we have perhaps faced in the Premier League since we were obviously promoted all those years ago. And Manchester City, although their wins and losses haven't been horrendous, they've not really seemed to be the team that they once were, in the sense that of pure dominance. Obviously, only narrowly beat Southampton, for instance. So when you saw the City team sheet, when you sort of saw how well we played against Liverpool in the first half, were you at least somewhat confident that we might be able to get a result? Or in your head, was it just, this is Manchester City, it doesn't matter what form they're in, they're a force to be reckoned with?
Well, something I found out relatively quickly after the first probably sort of 25, 30 minutes was something that Dagan's been saying for a good few weeks now, that every single team in this league this season is beatable, and we can get points from anywhere. And yesterday obviously proves it, and Dagan was stood there like, yeah, I'm the guy. Listen to me. But yeah, it's such a weird feeling, because as corrupted English fans who have only known disappointment in the past, you build yourself up for disappointment, don't you? You think, okay, well, this is Man City coming off the back of 3 losses. We know the script. We've seen it too many times.
Yeah. For me, it wasn't even that it was just Man City. It was just that it was a team in a bad run of form. And
yeah,
I think I posted in our group chat, I remember a Wigan game from the Championship days where Wigan hadn't won all season. They rocked up to the AMEX and beat us. And it was just since then, I've always been sort of like, whenever a team in a bad run of form come up against us, I'd bet my mortgage that we'd lose. I'm glad I didn't yesterday, of course. So that was sort of like where my head was at.
But for me, it just became very quickly obvious that the moment we were going to show any sort of ounce of energy, Man City were going to fall apart, because we gave them far too much respect in that first 25 minutes, far too much. And it took a while for our players to realize, actually, no, this team is more than beatable. We just need to put a few extra pieces together to find a way to, past them. And as I say, the moment we started to show that tiny little bit more energy, I was like, they hate the press. I was saying it in the group chat. They absolutely hate it when we show any form of turning up. And obviously we were crying out for Carlos Believer. But we'll go on more to talk about the way he changed the game. But yeah, it was a weird one, because when Haaland runs through like that, you're like, okay, that's the inevitable. Here we go. The floodgates are going to open. City are back. But they just didn't turn. Obviously, we have to give a lot of respect to Bart Verbruggen for keeping us in it, and City did have a lot of really good chances to make it more than just 1-0. But we gave ourselves a platform to go into half time to build on something, and that's the most important thing. I was like, get to half time at 1-0. Let's see where we can go from there. And yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the comments, Adrian said that the place was rocking. I mean, Chloe, obviously, you were there. Joe says about that first half and then maybe the first 20, 25 minutes being too passive, a bit too nice. What was the reaction from the crowd live and in person when sort of like Manchester City were given that freedom? Because you can't let a team like City, you can't give them that time and space on the ball, because they will hurt you.
Yeah, I think the first half, it was, well, the start of the first half up to 30, 35 minutes was very sort of negative. There was not a lot of atmosphere in the north. I'm in the northwest corner, so, but there wasn't a lot of sort of singing or anything. And a lot of people around me, quite grumbly about sort of how poor we were playing. I always hate that. I'm like, shut up, just watch the game, stop being so negative. I think that I don't say that, but yeah, I think it wasn't a particularly good showing at first, and I think we knew we were playing far from our best football, and we were capable of far better, and it did feel like we were giving them a bit too much respect. Yeah.
Dagan, what do you put that down to? Do you think that's personnel out there on the pitch? Do you think that's a tactical decision? Because it seemed like, obviously, as I just alluded to a moment ago, Yasin Ayari and Jack Hinchelwood against Liverpool were polar opposites. And I know it's not just on two players, but obviously in the midfield yesterday, I felt we were being overrun quite a little bit. So what do you put that down to? Tactics, personnel, or something else?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, and being perfectly candid, I have not watched the whole game back again, as I hoped I would by this point. Looking at the team sheet, even, it almost looked like it was just, let's stay within striking distance until we get some of the. I see O'Reilly as a very attacking midfielder, like wherever he plays. Even if he's playing like as a 6 or an 8, I think he's going to be more attacking. And supposedly he's capable of playing there. Gruda, I think wherever you put him is very attacking. João Pedro, wherever you put him, is very attacking. And we saw that late. Yes, I think there's that healthy degree of respect for the opponent. And I think when you play a team like that, you want to be within striking distance late in the game to take points from it. And I think that's one of the differences we've seen with Hursler already, is he consistently puts us in position to have a shot late in the game. We're not getting overrun. We may concede a goal here or there, but it's pretty infrequent that we're completely overrun by the opponent. I know we have the Chelsea, example where things went kind of sideways on us. But other than that, really, we've not done that. We've been in every game throughout. And even in the Chelsea game, we were in the game early, even though we were conceding. So I think it's a shift in mentality. And, I'm I'm never optimistic about us scoring lots of goals, certainly against a good team, when Adingra is on the right. I feel like we're a less attacking team with fewer options to attack when he's in that spot.
I think that's fair, and I think I've just seen Tom saying in the comments here, when we're up against those top teams like City, we can't pass around perhaps as much as we would like to because of the pressure that those players put on the player and on the ball, and that was pretty much sort of very telling in the first half. Obviously, that changed when a certain young midfielder came on, and also Joanna's also said about Rutter becoming more aggressive as well. But he was laying off a little bit yesterday. And I think as a team, I think we were too nice. Aaron said as much as well. Too nice, too respectful. And then, as I say, that all changes in the second half. But we'll get on to that. Joe, the mistake for the City goal came from our midfield. We gave the ball away. And then in one pass, Kovacic puts Haaland through. He gets in between JPVH and Igor, who I thought had a very good game. I'd like to talk about him in a bit. But no, he gets in between them. First shot is blocked by Vartbruggen, but then he puts away the second one. I think he's now the fastest player to score. Is it 75 goals in the Premier League or some stat like that? I don't know. As you said, Joe, he can be inevitable.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that in the build up to their goal, it was the right idea from Iari. And it was intercepted by a really good read of play by one of their defenders. And in transition, Manchester City can be devastating when they can play one pass, and Erling Haaland is just going to run through and be the powerhouse that he is and burst through your centre backs. And we saw how much JP Van Hecker struggled to sort of clear that off the line with Haaland sort of shadowing over him. And it's just one of those things. You can't give that player that much time to sort of run in behind you. And you have to be extremely switched on when you're playing Man City in the transition between losing the ball and them counter-attacking, because that's what they do. That they are, with the bad form that they've had, they are Manchester City, and they are devastating if you allow them to be. And that's what that was.
Yeah, I think so. And you talk about the transition there. I think they had a lot of joy in transition down our left. Is it Savinho? He had a golden opportunity before the goal, and it was a big save from Bart to deny him that. And I think generally, Chloe, Bart had to put in some fantastic saves during that first half, especially. Haaland had a great opportunity to make it 2-0, and I think it was his foot for Bruggen used to tip it onto the post. He was definitely the busier of the two keepers in the first half. What did you make of Big Bart's performance? And as Dagan said, keeping us in touching distance so we could go into the half only a goal down.
Yeah, I think he's become a really important player for us. He's been putting in some big performances recently. The last 3 or 4 games, he's made some great saves. And, the Newcastle game, he was one of the main reasons we actually got anything from that game. And again, yesterday, I nearly said today then, he was very important. And yeah, I think he's just going from strength to strength, and it's really good to see, because I think earlier on he was made the occasional error, but I think he's really coming into his own now, and is a really solid goalkeeper, and I think we're really lucky to have him.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's never a day goes by where you don't see a report of him being linked to like Barcelona or Real Madrid or somewhere else, and it makes you think what on earth Roberto De Zerbi was smoking last year when he consistently changed the goalkeepers out. I mean, no disrespect to Jason Steele, but I think Bart has very much shown why he is and should have been the number 1 last season as well. Dagan, I said I would like to talk about Igor. Igor came in after a late injury ruled Lewis Dunk out a few games ago, and I think it's fair to say that he has sort of come into the team. A lot of fans seem to not like Igor very much. I don't really know why, but I think he's come into the team and he's performed quite admirably. There was a few times yesterday where he sort of helped out Purvis, who does what Purvis does, bums on forward, and he was there to sort of clean up when City were hitting us on the counter. He made not a goal line clearance, but he put the ball over the bar in the first half, I think it was, when City were attacking. So he's sort of taken his chance really well. What have you made of Igor sort of, coming into the team pretty much not from out of the cold, but he's not the first name on the team sheet.
No, he's certainly not. And people have short memories, and recency bias is real. I think he has looked better. I think there are a lot of things that Igor does well, especially in possession. He's able to carry the ball. He's a little slippery with the ball at his feet, much in the same way that Baleba is. He has to make some unexpected feints and turns that you just wouldn't expect of a center back. And again, he spent much of his early career as a left back. So I think you see his comfort going forward there. I think, where that could put you at risk is if he misplays a pass and they go the other way, which I know once yesterday he attempted a through pass, I think maybe even in the second half. And I thought, oh no, they're going to get one back. I think it was late. I think after we had already taken the lead. He has played well. I think he has mental mistakes in him, much like I thought of Colwill. Like, I find them to be fairly similar players who they bring a lot when they're in good position and locked in. They perform really well in 1v1 situations, winning the ball. But just that like occasional lapse or being a little bit casual can get them caught out. Obviously this is a win and we're feeling really good about it. But I see discussions of, is there a question whether Dunk is still, a nailed on starter with Igor? And I just think 100% Dunk is a starter. Igor is growing into the role and getting better, but I don't think he's surpassed Lewis Dunk by any stretch at this point. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I think as captain, Lewis Dunk almost gets a freebie back into the team. I do think Dunk's becoming more injury prone. I say injury prone again very loosely because he's not injury prone in the same way Adam Webster is. But he certainly seems to have picked up a lot more injuries over the last few seasons. Of course, age. He's not old, but he's obviously into his 30s now. And sometimes he has looked a tad rusty at times. But again, when you're sort of coming back in and out of the squad because of injuries, it is likely to happen. So I think that's why it's so good to have someone like Igor who can step in and has performed so well. Of course, when Dunk is back, you'd expect him back in the team. Joe, just before we get on to sort of like what everyone's here for the second half, I'd just like to talk a little bit. I'm going to just get my tinfoil hat on because we are going to talk a little bit about the handball. Really nice pass from Hinchelwood, releases Matoma. Matoma gets behind Walker. He plays it into Welbeck, who comes in late. And his side footer is blocked by the defender, whose arm is, to be fair, in a pretty natural position for the commit. What he's done. He's slid in to block the pass. However, I'm not necessarily angry that wasn't given as a penalty or necessarily looked at. But part of me does think if that had been at the other end, we would have had a penalty given against us. Is that just a bit bitter from me, or do you think that's a fair comment to make?
I mean, after the refereeing performance that we saw, you're not far off thinking the same thing that everybody else was thinking in that stadium. Had that been at the other end, you probably bet your bottom dollar that VAR would try and find something to give Manchester City the penalty, to put them out of sight, and to make their title charge more exciting come the end of the season, because City would have picked up 3 points and it would been, closer to Liverpool. But that's as you say, Tom, the tinfoil hat sort of moments. But I want to talk about the refereeing performance solely because it was extremely biased, and I think it was very obvious that it was extremely biased. So many things that happened where we would, I don't know, grab someone's shirt, which is a professional foul, yellow card, absolutely. I agree with that. City would do the same thing. No yellow card. They'd do it again. No yellow card. Third time, then they get the yellow card. So yeah, that's a really frustrating thing when you see that sort of thing happening week in, week out across the Premier League. It's not just the Premier League, really, though, is it? It's officiating mostly as a whole in the world. That there is always some sort of bias towards, I don't know, the team that
certain clubs.
Yeah, the teams that they want the narrative to center around. But he couldn't stop what came in the second half. So
no, he couldn't. And I think just really quickly, my favourite one, I think it was when Haaland trod on the ball and he gave a free kick, and then Igor remonstrates by putting his hands up. And I know referees have been told to cut down on dissent with immediate yellows, so I kind of get it. But at the same time, I also get Igor's frustration because he's literally done nothing. Yeah, but colour me surprised.
Yeah, but there was a moment in the second half where a Manchester City player, you can clearly see him mouth "F off" to the referee. No yellow card. So
I am shocked.
I know.
I'm shocked at the level of inconsistency.
Bearing in mind our our captain got a red card for swearing at an official. So,
it's almost like there's two-tier refereeing in the Premier League. Who would have thought it? Let's talk about the second half, Chloe. Let's talk about how good that second half was. But let's talk about what I believe certainly was the thing that made it so good, and that was a change. Yasin Ayari, who was on a yellow card, came off, and on came Carlos Baleba, a player who we very much missed against Liverpool. Certainly missed in the first half against Manchester City, although we did get better as the first half went on. But you want to talk about game changers. Carlos Baleba changed that game. His aggression, his tenacity, he was the catalyst that changed it all. What did you make of that change, Chloe, and just how important, in your opinion, was that change?
Yeah, it was a game changer. I think it was quite a sort of obvious change almost. I think bringing on Baleba, he's been such an important player for us this season. I think he's carrying a bit of something at the moment, which is why he hasn't been starting. But with Ayari on a card as well, it was the right substitution to make, and he just came on and he just absolutely ran the game. And I see people talking about him being our next £100 million player, and all I can say is, you don't want him. He's rubbish. Back off.
Yes, he's crap. Honest, that was a one-off. Honestly, but yeah, as Chloe says, Dagan, he came on, and it was everything we were missing in the first half. And as Joe said, Manchester City didn't like being pressed, and then you've got a player who's just tenacious and just goes after everything. And he was pivotal in the goals. He was pivotal in the chances we created before that. Do you agree with Chloe? Is he our next £100 million player?
Probably. That recent list of under 21s that was published, he was in the top 20 in the world. I think estimated at like 52 million right now. If he keeps doing what he's doing, then yeah, he probably will be. We just hope we make the Champions League and he doesn't want to leave. I want to insert, because I'm going to continue to beat this drum, that the goal is to get to that level. I'm more and more sure of it with every passing week. What's cool is that I think as we start approaching that level, the depth that we are building and will be able to support in a sustainable way, in a way we couldn't a couple of years ago. We have Gomez coming. right? I mean, we have plenty of midfielders right now. And we're not going to stop signing players, but we're well positioned for whoever becomes our best to leave and then have someone in the team currently who's ready, maybe not quite as good, but ready and experienced, and then use some of that money to bring in another young talent, right? And that was the piece that was kind of missing, is we weren't able to expend money sort of in advance of that player being lost. We were spending that money on a prospect, but not a player, if that makes sense. And I think now we're getting more players in while also getting prospects like a Yakuye, right? A Kozier Dewberry, who is a prospect. Those guys might pan out, but they might not be ready for another couple of years. It's the whole thing, right? And the refrain is now, how is Brighton doing this? How they, continue to lose other players and lose other managers and everything. But here we are, and it's Tony Bloom. It's the plan, and Baleba was a part of that plan, and he was a part of the plan that De Zerbi felt like wasn't ready. But all of us, every time he played last year, felt like this is the guy. We need him out there. But he didn't fit De Zerbi's system, which is why De Zerbi didn't actually fit our system. Just a side note. Baleba was ready to do much of this last year, in my opinion.
Yeah, hard to disagree. And I just want to point out what Ollie said in the chat about Yakoye. He played really well midweek in the Champions League. I genuinely think he's gonna be the next Baleba, isn't he? Let's be honest, Baleba's gonna go, and then Yakoye will come in and take his place alongside young Jack Hinchelwood, who will never leave. Because we like to keep hold of those Sussex-born players, don't we? Like Duncan March. Let's talk, Joe, about the flurry of chances we had, because we had lots of chances before we could actually score. Matoma, look, I want to talk about him a little bit first, because he had a moment in the second half where he got a header and he just literally just gave it to Ederson. He was like, "Here you go, mate. I'm just going to give you a little header back to you." Matoma's, is it
Exactly
low?
how Matoma sounds. Exactly how he sounds.
Thanks. I did my best. Do you think it's low confidence with Matoma? Do you think it's this is purely from a scoring and finishing perspective, not in terms of build-up play, because I think we saw yesterday how good his build-up play still is, but just from a finishing perspective, not seem to be something at the races at the moment, Joe.
I think he's lost confidence in that final moment. He hasn't scored since Everton away, I believe. Didn't have the best preseason, really. When you go to Japan and you expect to be that player, which he was. He's the name. He's what everyone's coming out to see. And even there, he just seemed to be lacking that little bit of confidence in that final moment where you're through on goal and you need to put your foot through it. I think it's a weird one with Matoma, because he's so good in that build-up. He gets away from players and probably gives himself too much time to think when he's faced with the goalkeeper. I think if you see an instinctive Matoma, like the goal against Everton, boom, it arrived at his feet, finish. So yeah, I think it's a mixture of too much time to think and just not enough confidence in himself that he's going to bury that chance. And hopefully, once he gets one, they'll start sort of flying in, because we know that Karu Matoma is and can be clinical, and we've seen it before. Let's just hope we get that Karu back, because we miss you, Karu. But keep doing what you're doing in the build-up, because that's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, I've got to say that. I mean, it's not the build-up play, it's not the dribbling, it's not the crossing. That's still really good. It's just, again, it's just those chances. The header, as I say, back to Ederson. There was another one where he was through, heavy touch. Ederson's starting position was very good, but even so, that heavy touch just took it away from him. But Chloe, another chance. I just want to take it again. Jack Hinchelwood. A fantastic header from the centre of the box. And shortly after that, he did go off injured. He's scored a lot of headers, Jack has. He's fantastic in the air. Great young lad. Disappointing to see him hobble off with an injury. It looked like a knee injury, so it could be a repeat of a previous injury, which was disappointing, but it did mean that Matt O'Reilly could come on. So, Yeah, but was it disappointing to see Jack leave the pitch? He's been pivotal for Herzler's side. He's played at the back as a defender in the midfield as well.
Yeah, I think he's Brighton, isn't he? He's Brighton through and through, and he's such a talented young lad, and he's been so important for us this season and last season, and it was a real shame to see him hobble off, even though it was nice to see O'Reilly come on for his Premier League debut. And hopefully he's not out for too long, although I think we've got the depth to cover if he is out for a bit. Not too long, though. I don't want him out for too long. But hopefully we can cope without him for however long he's out for, which hopefully he'll be back after the international break.
Yeah, he is certainly hoping, as I say, really pivotal young player for us. But as you say, Chloe, and we got that depth. Yasin Yari's obviously been a breakthrough this season. Mats Weifer, who hasn't necessarily settled well into the Premier League yet. Then, of course, Matt O'Reilly. Dagan, do you think it was always the plan for Matt O'Reilly to get as much game time as he did? Or would you have thought that considering returning from a reasonably lengthy injury and surgery, he might have had less time had things gone slightly different?
That's a fair question. I mean, I would imagine that was about it. He came on somewhere in the 57th to 66th minute, somewhere in there, right? So I would think that's probably about right. Kind of a third of a game, maybe a little less. Although in this case, a little more, given that there was 10 minutes of extra time added on to, give City a chance. Yeah, I'm surprised, having seen the injury, that he's back. I just feared he would be out for so much longer. So just thrilled to see him back, but wasn't surprised that he had the amount of time that he did.
Yeah, it was so nice to see his handsome little face coming onto the pitch.
He was a difference maker for sure.
Yes, as you say, Dagan, he's just so forward thinking, and I think he'd only been on the pitch a couple of minutes, and you saw that. So it was really a really positive change, and I think a midfield duo of Baleba, who's instinctively tenacious, as I've said before, who's going to win you that ball back, and Matt O'Reilly, who wants to get forward. I think that's going to be a really dangerous partnership. Joe, let's talk about the goals. Let's talk about our goals. Now, against Liverpool and against Wolves, we conceded 2 very quick-fire goals. But now it was our turn, because we scored 2 quick-fire goals in a matter of 4-5 minutes. So we've just said Matoma finishing. But again, absolutely pivotal in the goal. A lovely pass into Welbeck in the box. It's a bit of a melee in there with Welbeck and the City players. But João Pedro's there. He swivels on a sixpence and he scores from close range. I mean, absolutely fantastic for the man. He had put one wide moments before that. So a really good sort of way to come back into the squad.
Yeah, I mean, Chloe can talk us through the limbs in the North Stand, I'm sure, in a little while. But my goodness me, João Pedro, hey Siri, define clutch. João Pedro will show up on your iPhone screen, because that guy just seems to pop up at the moments that you need him the most. But he's always given himself that opportunity. He's always lurking in around that area, and he's so dangerous. So dangerous. And the way he sort of just picks that ball out of the cluster of Man City shirts that had all fallen over each other, and they were claiming it was a foul, which was really, really funny, and just smashed it into the back of the net. My goodness me. João Pedro, as he said in his celebrations, I'm back. Oh my God, we need him back, because, yeah, what an unbelievable player that we've got. And we've spoken about a £100 million player in Carlos Baleba. But when you've got a guy that can score you 20 goals a season like he did last season for us, yeah, it's going to be hard to keep hold of him. But I really, really do pray that we keep him for as long as we can, because that guy is taking us places. He really is.
Yeah, very important. I think, Dagan, you said last season he was our MVP, because he is just, when he's on the pitch, he can just one of those players that can just make things happen, and you want him out there as much as possible. And again, I said at the top of the show, Welbeck and Ruter have been absolutely brilliant. There's no denying that. And I've been a big fan of, that sort of combination of the two. But João Pedro is just different gravy. And it was so nice to see him not only score, but also after that chance he missed where he put it well wide, his head could have quite easily have dropped and he could have sort of, sulked a little bit. But no, he didn't. He put himself into a position and he managed to get us level back into the game. And then Chloe, 5 minutes later, if that, Matt O'Reilly pounces on a ball in from João Pedro. But I have to just quickly say, Baleba in the middle. He's the man that makes that move happen. Gets the ball, feeds it to João Pedro, who puts in a lovely weighted ball. And to start with, it was one of those moments where O'Reilly lets the ball do a lot of the work, which is what you teach kids to do, let the ball roll. But I'm going, just kick it, just kick it, just kick it. And it was that infinitesimal little second or two while I was just waiting for him to put his foot through it. But it was such a delicate touch to poke it past Edison. A really nicely taken goal. And what a way to score on your debut and after a lengthy injury. Fantastic. I bet the North Stand was absolutely bouncing.
Yeah, it was a very well worked goal. As you said, straight from Baleba through to O'Reilly. Every player that was involved in that move just did so well. And yeah, the North it's like, we're winning, we're beating City. And I was very happy as well to see who had scored after a lengthy injury. He hadn't really played for us at all. And then to get a goal, and it was such a well taken shot. He's, so calm on the ball to finish it that well. And yeah, it was just brilliant, absolute limbs. And yeah, I was just like, don't mess it up now, Brighton, please. I want all 3 points now.
Just before we get on to perhaps the longest 9 minutes of the season, I just want to come back to a comment that Kev made a bit earlier, Dagan, which was Matt O'Reilly might be one of the bargains of the summer. I know that me and you sort of had a little chat in the summer about sort of some of the players we were getting in and the leagues that they had played in, and I wasn't particularly convinced a player from the Scottish Premier League would be able to do the business in the Premier League. Obviously, a fantastic debut for the lad against Manchester City in the Premier League. He's obviously got experience of playing in European competitions, which is fantastic. Do you see him to be one of those players that when he's back fully fit, he is one of the starting names on the team sheet?
I think that's the most likely outcome. And part of it is just he's so versatile. He's 6'2". He moves well. He can finish. He's another guy who you can plug a lot of holes with. And that creates, opportunity to shift other players around the pitch or put them in their optimal position because he can play elsewhere. Again, I just think the more guys you have like that, it's a luxury. And again, he brings pace. He's not a slow player. My confidence in the summer was born out of, in the Champions League, especially, he excelled, right? He was getting goal contributions for a Celtic team that was struggling in the Champions League, but he himself was, contributing quite well and, looked to be one of the best players on the pitch against some of the best players in the world. Cute. Yeah, I like a lot of our players. The guys are doing well. O'Reilly, yeah, I think what we saw, we're going to see a lot more of. The point I want to make about his debut that just made this beautiful is he had possibly the worst imaginable debut in a Brighton shirt, right? And that's nightmarish beyond nightmares. To have his Premier League debut, to come on late, to score a winner against City, like that, like just as a human being, like you couldn't ask for any more, but also how deserved, right? To have that moment, having suffered his first moment in the shirt, be so cruel. So just doubly happy for the guy. Yeah, I think he's going to be a fan favorite for sure. Chloe agrees.
I mean, yeah, he's a beautiful man. And I just want to say this. I know this is going to sound really superficial, but he talks really well as well. He's very well spoken. He is able to communicate really effectively. And for me, that makes me sort of like him even more. He just speaks really well. His post-match comments were really positive. Yeah, it was really nice to hear him talk. So yeah, big fan already. 9 minutes of hell, Joe. 9 minutes of injury time. I think there was an issue with the Lino's communications box. Obviously, Hinchelwood injury as well. 9 minutes, and in that 9 minutes, City racked up a fair few chances. De Bruyne, who came on in the second half, great, just what you want to see. Fired wide. Foden, who normally scores against us, also fires wide of the post. It was a header from across from Walker, I think it was. So Man City did pepper our box. There was an amusing bit towards the end between Van Hecke and Haaland, but it almost felt like it was one of those times, a bit like back in the late 90s, early noughties, where it was, we're going to play until Manchester United score because of Fergie time. It felt like we're going to play until Manchester City score until I feasibly can't make this last any longer.
Pep time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the longest 9 minutes I've ever had to endure. I remember waiting for that fourth officials board to go up just to see how much torture we would be put through. And I was literally watching the clock tick over to 90 to hope that the Sky cameras then panned to the fourth official to show a nicer number than what we saw. That wasn't the case. And then literally every single good action, I was counting it. I was like, okay, that's 20 seconds. All right, now that's 30 seconds. And I was just like, honestly, I felt like time had stopped at one point. It was like the 95th minute, and I was like, oh, I've still got to do 4 minutes of this. How am I going to do 4 minutes? And there was a moment where Purvis broke through and was running sort of through the centre of Man City, and I was like, oh, thank goodness for that. That's going to waste at least a minute of that. And then, you know, when Bart jumped up to claim that, what was it, a header back across goal? Goodness me, the relief. And then obviously we saw what happened between JP and Erling Haaland, which could have really done JP some horrific damage. The way Erling sort of flung himself on top of Van Hecke, and I know Van Hecke had hold of him, but I felt like Haaland made more of that than what he needed to. And his knee was literally an inch away from diving straight into Van Hecke's face. And that could have done some real serious damage. So whilst Pep is having a go at JP Van Hecke at the end, have a word with your own, because you're endangering an opponent. And rightly so, the AMEX crowd were shouting off, off, off. That would have topped it for me. But yeah, the overall feeling is that the Danes overdid the Dutch. So unlucky Erling.
The Dutch, he's Norwegian.
Dutch. The Danes overdid the Norwegians. Goodness me, I'm thinking of JP Van Hecke. The Danes overdid the Norwegians. So stay humble, Erling Haaland. Thank you very much.
You have to shoot off in a sec, so over to you.
I do. So my research project was conducted during the pod. I don't know if you guys have looked at the stats, but in the second half alone, we produced 6 big chances against City. And we had 8 in the game. 8 big chances. That's a huge number of big chances. I don't know if everybody follows stats, but those chances that get labeled big, they're hard to come by. So I haven't looked back to find another 8 because I didn't have enough time to look far enough back in the past to find another 8. But they've only had 6 big chances allowed in 4 total games prior to this one. dating all the way back to when I first started following Brighton at the beginning of the 2022-23 season. So we produced as many big chances in one half as any team has produced against them an entire game over the past 2 and now a quarter seasons. That the lineups that we can put on the pitch are frightening, and we are just scratching the surface with João Pedro coming back. It's an exciting time to be a Brighton fan. But that's an undeniable, very clear metric of just how strong we were in attack against a team that I get they're lacking, and I get they don't have Rodri, but they've been without Rodri a number of times over the past 2.5 seasons. Sure, they look more vulnerable, but they haven't looked this vulnerable against any team in recent memory. And we have to give ourselves credit for that. We can't just say, well, City's not City. They're still City. They may not be peak City, but they're still City. And they're still sitting second in the table. So yeah, I'd love to go dig further and find the last time they allowed 8 big chances in a game, and certainly the last time they allowed 6 big chances in a match. But I ran out of time. I made it back to the start of 2022, which felt like a long time. So just wanted to give a shout out for that. Just impressed with the squad. I saw somebody in the chat. I think it was Joanna. We sealed the game out well. I'm really glad I don't have to choose a man of the match because there's so many good candidates. I'm just going to leave it to you guys. And sorry to bounce early. Thanks everybody for being in the chat, and thanks for listening. And
thanks, Dagan. Take it easy, mate.
Cheers.
We'll see you soon. Thank you, Dagan. Some really interesting stats there. Manchester City. Ollie's just put in the chat there about it's classic Pep, the whole thing with JP, diverting the attention away from the fact that they've lost. I mean, a lot is made out of this, the City stats. It's the first time Pep Guardiola has lost 4 games in a row in all competitions for the very first time in his managerial career. And Manchester City have lost 4 straight games for the first time since August 2006. It's not exactly, Bury going under sort of levels, Chloe, but obviously for Manchester City, they're not particularly favourable stats. So did you see the sort of coming together of Van Hecker and Pep as more sort of Pep just trying to divert attention away? A bit like he did, again, like Ollie suggests, when we beat them under Potter, and he had this whole thing of he didn't like how Potter celebrated. Do you think it's just Pep sort of playing the game?
Yeah, he needs to focus on his own team, I think. Because obviously they're not doing very well at the moment. And if it really is because they don't have Rodri, 115 charges and you didn't get a backup, like seriously, it's just a bit ridiculous. They've still got so many good players. They were bringing on the likes of Silva and De Bruyne. So it's not like they don't still have bags of talent. I think they are in a bad patch of form. And maybe he should focus on his own team instead of trying to coach ours.
It's funny, isn't it? Pep always, I don't get me wrong, I like Pep and I admire him greatly for what he's done for football. But it always seems to me like he always likes Brighton. He always goes on about how great we are. But that's normally because he beats us. But the 2 times we have beaten him, he's been really sort of arsey afterwards. And I saw after the Southampton game when he was like, I can learn a lot from Russell Martin. I'm like, what can you learn from Russell Martin, Pep? Really? He's very good at sort of bigging you up when you sort of roll over for him or he beats you. But as soon as you sort of get into them a little bit, he doesn't like it. So that's disappointing. Joe, I've got some more stats for you.
I'll tell you what, just very quickly, what he can learn from Russell Martin is the fact that Russell Martin has the Russell Martin Foundation, which is a charity in and around the Brighton and Hove area where kids can go and have coaching sessions. So that's what he can learn from Russell Martin, is to put a bit more into the community. I don't know if Pep does. That might be a bit of a snag there, but he can learn community work.
Oh, that's nice. And props to you, Russell Martin, for doing that. Of course, Russell Martin is a local lad. But Joe, some stats for you. I mean, I was quite grumpy after we lost to Liverpool, and I was like, we've dropped 10 points from winning positions this season. But in Hurslow's first 11 games in the Premier League as our head coach, we have done fantastic when we've conceded first, and we've yet to lose a game where we've conceded first. We came back against Manchester, well, not Manchester United. We scored first with it, but we came back against Nottingham Forest. We beat Tottenham, and now, of course, we've beaten City. So that's a pretty decent stat, Joe, coming from behind to win those games, and against decent opposition as well. Arsenal as well, we drew with them.
Really good stats when you look at it that way. Obviously, you can spin the narrative and talk about the Ipswich game, the Wolves game. That is what it is. People can look at what they want to look at and feel negative or feel positive of how it's gone. Me personally, I feel like it's been a fantastic first few months with Fabian Hurtzler, and we are not slowly, I guess, because it's only been a few months, but we are starting to see that no matter how many times people mention his age, we have got a very mature and very capable coach here, and the decision to hire him wasn't because we lost out on Kieran McKenna, wasn't because we couldn't get Ruben Almiron, wasn't because we couldn't get anybody else, that he was the first choice because, as Dagan's mentioned so many times, he fits the Brighton mould. He fits what Tony Bloom and the board want to do. And that's not the board saying, I want a yes man. That's the board having a clear vision, which has worked so incredibly well. The board's vision that got us into Europe, the board's vision that will get us into Europe again. So as long as we can keep consistently applying that plan, then things will gradually grow. And I think that's what we're seeing with Fabian Hurtzler. I say gradual, few month growth, and learning about the Premier League and learning about his squad as well. It's not a huge amount of time to have with the squad of players. He got a full preseason, which was good, and he's got a lot of options, was backed heavily in the transfer market, and that's the best possible start you can give a coach, and he's taken that start, and emphatically as well. So, really promising stuff.
Not bad at all for a 2-bit team. And it also makes you think about where we could be if those games, for instance, as you say, against Wolves, we were 5 minutes away from another 2 points on the board, which would put us even higher in the table, be sat third now. And of course, Liverpool, we played very well against them in the first half. Ipswich, Forest, Ipswich today beat Spurs, and obviously Forest are doing really well at the moment. But it's like Dagan says, I think this is the first time I've known it, where it genuinely feels in the Premier League, everyone can beat everyone. That's always been a very championship sort of accolade. Oh, everyone can beat everyone. But this is the first season I've genuinely felt that in the Premier League. So it'll be really interesting to see how we get on this season. We've done really well. We've made a really good start. We've played most of, in fact, if not all of, the quote-unquote Big Six. And we've also, apart from Villa, we've also played Newcastle as well. So we're very much sort of doing very well. I think Fulham are doing really well. And the next team we face, Chloe, have also made a really positive start to the season, and that's Bournemouth. And I always think of Bournemouth as a bit of a bogey team. I know we have beaten them in the Premier League era, but they always seem to be, for me, a team that we struggle against, and they've made a really good start. We have the international break, so the time for the lads to rest, relax, recuperate, and all that jazz. But when we do return, a couple of tough games. I don't think Southampton, which will be our home game, will be as easy as all that either. What do you make of the next two games, Bournemouth and Southampton?
Yeah, I mean, Bournemouth, I think, are a very difficult team to play. And when you mentioned Bournemouth, I thought, didn't we beat them 5-0 at one point? And then I remembered it was the other way around. So yeah, going to their place, I think it's always a tough place to go. And I think they're in a bit of good form at the moment. Obviously, they beat City. So I reckon it'll be a tough game, but I do feel like I go into every game believing we can win it. And I don't see any reason why we can't. I do think we're going from strength to strength under Hertzler. I think obviously as he and the team get more settled, got all these new signings settling in, and yeah, it would be nice to get some more wins. But obviously it doesn't always go as planned, especially with Brighton. I think we struggle a lot. I think Southampton, obviously, I think they're at the bottom of the Premier League as it stands. And we do struggle against teams at the other end of the table, especially when they sit back and defend. And we struggle to break them down. But hopefully we can manage to. I think we've got quite a few good attacking options. So we'll just have to see how it goes, but I've got every faith in Brighton to get the job done and get some points from those games.
That's a really nice outlook, Chloe. Really positive. Fantastic. I've just realised before we signed off, guys, we haven't done player of the match. So, Joe, I'm going to come to you first. Against Manchester City, who was your player of the match?
I'll do a podium, as Dagan likes to do, because Dagan's not here, so I'll take that responsibility. Third, I will put. Oh, it's tough. It's really, really tough. I will put JP Van Hecke, because I believe he was part of a very good partnership of another name that's going to crop up in this podium. Second, I will put Carlos Baleba. I know. He was the catalyst. He gave us the energy in midfield to spur us on to do what we did. But for me, just because he doesn't get the credit he deserves, and so many fans have written him off very, very quickly. I say quickly, he's been with us a season and a bit now. But Igor, I've got to give him the man of the match, because he could have easily let that goal that Haaland scored go to his head and lose confidence in his ability to control such a formidable forward. But he didn't. And he played a fantastic game and gave us, with JP Van Hecke, with Verbruggen, that platform to build on to then go on to win the game. So, yeah, for me, it's got to be Igor.
Fair. How about you, Chloe?
Yeah, I did actually on my Instagram. I said I thought Igor was man of the match for me. I think Baliba's a fair shout as well, because obviously, changed the game when he came on. But for me, yeah, I went with Igor.
Yeah, for me, I think, you do want to do a podium. You got to put Igor, probably Bart. I think, again, he keeps us in the game with some of the saves he made. But I've got to give it to Baleba, just simply because he was the catalyst that changed the game. His energy, his work rate in the middle was what, for me, changed the game. I'm not saying that if he hadn't have been brought on, if Ayari had stayed on, who knows what that game could have been. We might have ended up the same result. It could have gone the other way. I don't know. But for me, just Baleba, because everything that he brought in the second half was everything we were missing in the middle in the first half. So, yeah, for me, Baleba, for being an absolute game changer.
I don't know what it is, but whenever someone talks about what could have been if something else had happened, it gives me a whole lot of anxiety that suddenly history is going to change itself and Ayari would have played that game and we would have lost. So yeah, don't do that, Tom.
Don't worry, Joe. If you're, was it the very crude saying goes, if your auntie had balls, she'd be your uncle. So it's one of those where
if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bike.
That's the one as well. Exactly. You could say that. So there you go. No sense in worrying about it. But there you go. Thank you guys for joining us on this live edition of Albion Obsessed. Of course, it's the international break now. So we'll be back after that. But don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And yes, Joseph, I can see your hands in the air. Is that you wanting to ask a question? Or are you just doing a little dance?
I really need a wee. No, I'm joking. Just to shout out that the Albion women are playing at the AMEX on Saturday, the 16th of July. I was going to say July, 16th of November, 12:30 kickoff. get your tickets, go and support the women's team. They've had a fantastic start to the WSL season. Lost to 5-0 to Arsenal on Friday, but we'll forget about that. But yeah, come and support a fantastic team, another fantastic Albion team with another new coach who have had a really good start. So yeah, hopefully a top 4 finish for the Albion in the WSL.
It's interesting you actually you bring that up, Joe, because after seeing that result, because obviously the Arsenal women's team have had a pretty poor start to their season, I saw that as an omen. You know, poor start to the season, face Brighton, win. Manchester City, 3 games on the bounce losing. They're going to come to Brighton. I saw the omens, but we turned it around. And that's
something else I'm really excited for this week is I'm going to see the Standoff All documentary on Friday, 8 p.m. I think there's still a few tickets going. They've put on a few extra, dates, times. So yeah, get along, go and support that because we've been waiting an age for it. And also because I mentioned the women's game, go and follow She Goals. They do the She Goals podcast, which we're very proud to power and to help out. They've got a fantastic podcast over there. So go and listen to them if you want to get your women football fix.
Thank you, Joseph. Very good little plug. That was all left. All that's left to say is don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you to Joe and Chloe for joining us this evening, and Dagan as well, who has had to go and do American things in America. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I've already said that, but I'll say it again because, do the thing because we're just a 2-bit podcast and we need all those likes and subscriptions. Bloody hell, it's late on a Sunday. Go and enjoy your Sunday evening, wherever you may be, whenever you may be. I'll see you next time, and I might be able to talk then. Take care. Bye-bye.